where would you start with that client if they came to work with you and you feel like there's something there and, and they don't see it? How would you address that?
The self-sabotage thing is an interesting one, because I've definitely reframed this over the last couple of years for me. We all think, and a lot of us say we self-sabotage in some part of our life, and it happens a lot with dieting and fat loss, right? I like to think of it more like self-protection, like what these reasons that we're overeating for a reason, and we're quote unquote sabotaging on our diet for a reason. And the important thing is looking at why that might be. So on a surface level, if it was a client, I'd say, why do you think this has not worked for you in the past? What are the reasons that you felt like you've overeaten in the past? Why do you feel like you haven't maintained things in the past? Like, those types of questions are really, really important. But then if it's overeating and that kind of self-sabotage on fat loss, I would say, like, well, what benefit is that bringing to you? I'd say it's not a benefit. I hate it. It's like, there's the benefit to that. And the compassionate way of looking at this, and that's what we want to do, right, is say, okay, well, it's totally human to overeat, like we all overeat, but really looking at, okay, well, if we can figure out what purpose that's serving, then we can meet that need somewhere else. And sometimes it's like a fear of success or a fear of failure, right? A lot of people will say, well, when I've lost this weight, then I'll start dating, or I'll go for this job, or I'll wear a bikini, and whatever it may be. And actually, when we get closer to that, that's actually a really scary thing, because we don't want to do those things, and it's terrifying. So what we'll do is we'll sabotage ourselves and come back so that we won't ever have to get there, right? So there's like that fear. But other times it could be like, maybe you've overeaten on and off since you were 16, and actually overeating for you when you were 16 was your way of giving yourself comfort when you couldn't get comfort from people around you. And so as you start to give that up, you're like, there's a part of you inside that's like, no, like, I need that comfort. That's important to me. And although, yes, it's technically still a choice, you have these kind of habit loops in your brain that genuinely are soothing to you. They help regulate you, and they have done for 15, 20, 30, 40 years. And so you have to make space to say, like, okay, there's a therapeutic technique called internal family systems, which, have you heard of it before?
Actually, I haven't, no.
It's incredible. There's a really good book called No Bad Parts that kind of touches on this. And obviously it's a therapeutic technique, so I don't use it specifically, but it's the idea of noticing these parts of yourself and treating them with openness, and saying, like, almost opening up and being like, I hear you. I know that you want to be soothed. I know you want to be comforted, but we don't need to do it like this anymore. We're adults. I'm going to comfort you in a different way, and I'm going to soothe you in a different way, rather than being like, I hate this part of me. Just shut up, and I'm just going to like try and starve it out, because that doesn't work. What you resist persists. So instead of pushing everything away, it's more about opening everything, like bringing everything in, which can be quite a scary thing.
Yeah, it can. I remember when I heard you say, I think the exact words were, well, it's serving you somehow. And I just remember watching that on Instagram one evening, and just, when you just feel like personally attacked.
Yeah.
And that made me question a lot of things. And it sounds so simple, but the idea that what you're doing, whilst negative on the surface, is actually serving you somehow. Otherwise you wouldn't be doing it. So just like you need a correct medical diagnosis to have the relevant treatment, you would need the correct diagnosis. So, okay, well, why are you doing this? Why is it serving you? To then address that. But as you just said, that is incredibly scary. So I've kind of got two questions on that. I mean, if you're, a person listening that's trying to work through this by themselves, and that is scary and confrontational, how would you kind of go about that? And also, if you're a personal trainer, in particular, a male personal trainer working with a female coach, how do you maybe create a safe space to facilitate those conversations, which can be quite uncomfortable, especially when there's maybe, a bit of a gender difference?
I think if you're trying to work through it yourself, like, that's where journaling is really helpful. And I would recommend reading a book like No Bad Parts. I think actually that's a really good place to start, probably for everyone. And again, I'm not saying anyone should be using these techniques on anyone, that you're not, unless you're a therapist and you're qualified in IFS, right? But it's just to open your eyes to start to think about, I wonder where that might have come from. I think if you're doing it for yourself, just think about what those habits are that you don't like about yourself. And there's two things here. One is a task that I do with my clients, which I think is really important, is often when we have habits that we don't like, we're really critical of them. And one thing that I recommend everyone do is to write down everything it is that you don't like about that, what you feel about it, how it makes you feel, etc. And then like have a wee break and come back to it and write a letter from somebody that you really love, whether they're dead or alive, and almost from their perspective write what they would say to you about that, and then just sit with that, and it helps you realize that, one, you can speak to yourself kindly, that that person didn't say that, you said that, but two, that's what compassion looks like, and that's really important that we treat ourselves with that kind of respect. Often we think if we treat ourselves with compassion, we're going to let go of our goals. We're not going to try any harder. We're not going to achieve things. But we know from the research the opposite happens. And the more compassionate people tend to achieve more, and we can deal with things. We can deal with setbacks easier, and we can keep going, and we can push ourselves harder. So that's the first thing, so that you're coming at it from a compassionate stance, I think. And then the next thing is, I think, journaling on it and saying, like, what benefits do I get from this? And it's kind of as simple as that, although it might not be easy to come up with it. Really think about, like, what am I trying to achieve with fat loss? What am I holding off until I achieve fat loss? What does my body when I'm smaller mean to me? What does my body when I'm bigger mean to me?
Love that.
I think sometimes we also say things like, with motivational interviewing, often we'll say, and like PTs kind of on a baseline level will get taught, like, what's the benefits of being in a smaller body? Like, what's the benefits? How do you want to feel when you get there? And it's like, that's important, right? But it's also saying, how does it feel to let go of, like, where you are? And sometimes we have to grieve, like, I'll have clients have to grieve their larger bodies, grieve their emotional eating, because especially with emotional eating, it's genuinely like a nice thing sometimes. Like, in the short term, it's not like we hate emotional eating all the time. We don't like it the next day. We don't like it when we're struggling with our fat loss, or if it's a consistent thing. But normal emotional eating, a bit of emotional eating, can genuinely bring us comfort.